Hey, Howell here. What I want to do today is make a video, like a video cast, talking about Satan in the Bible. I'm only going to use, I only want to talk about where the word Satan or Ha-Satan, or sometimes I've heard it pronounced Ha-Shaitan as it is in Arabic, in the Bible. And it meaning, I'm not going to be dealing with Isaiah 14:12 in this video, etc. So the word Satan means accuser or challenger or opposer, tempter. And it's my opinion, like a title, and it's my view that it's based on a Set of ancient Egypt, like the name Set with the case ending Saturn. I'm guessing there, but he is the god of the wilderness. He's the god, the deity of the night. He defeats Horus in the evening and descends into the underworld. He's got an animal head and a human body, rather like Baphomet or Baphomet. And so, but going back to the Bible, I don't find a mention of the word Satan, Ha-Satan, in the first 5 books of the Bible, which is known as the Torah. And the first mention I've come across, correct me if I'm wrong, is in Chronicles 1:21, verse 1. So I'll read it here. Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count the people of Israel. So what's interesting here is that Satan is not introduced. They're just straight into this word. They've not said that there's a deity called Satan or an evil god called Satan, blah, 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 like that. It's not that. Or what the word means. And Israel in this context is referring to people, the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob or Jacob. And so Satan is giving David a command to count the people of Israel. So David then says to Joab and his commanders of the army, go number Israel from Beersheba to Dan and bring me a report. Okay, so David is literally carrying out a command that Satan's giving. Joab then protests, but to no avail. And then David then realizes that he has sinned and then repents. And that's it. That's it for Chronicles 1:21. And the next mention is much more in detail. And it's the book of Job. Not Joab, Job. I made that mistake once before. So it's the book of Job 1:6. And Job is the oldest book in the Bible, in the Tanakh. But it's not the oldest in time. And if I read here, one day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before God, and Satan also came amongst them. So what we've got is this sort of heavenly forum with heavenly beings, and it implies that Satan is not one of the heavenly beings there, but he also came amongst them. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? And the Satan says, Satan replied, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. So what we have is the war in heaven, or where Satan is banished from heaven. What we'll see later in Revelation. And then there he is back in heaven again. So what's he doing there? Long after he's been banished. Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. So Yahweh here, Hashem, is putting the idea of Job into Satan's mind, because he's got an idea, he's got a plan. And the plan is to make Job's life as miserable as hell. And then Satan said to God, Does not Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him? Yeah. You have blessed him, you've blessed him, etc. But stretch out your hand to him and he will curse you. And so that God is about to enter into a deal with Satan to make Job's life an absolute misery, which is what happened. And so the Lord said, very well, all that I have is in your power, only do not stretch out your hand against him. Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So from here, Job's life becomes an absolute misery. And he then redeems himself and overcomes the power of Satan. And then the last chapter, which is 42, verse 11, we got the brothers and sisters appearing with Job to offer him sympathy and comfort him. And I'll quote here, for all the evil that the Lord has brought upon Job. So the book is actually admitting that Yahweh had brought evil upon Job via Satan, via the accuser, the challenger, the opposer. And then we move to Psalms 109, verse 6. And it starts with, to the leader of David, a psalm. And it says here, they say, appoint a wicked man against me. Let an accuser stand on his right. So there you will hear many references to Satan standing on the right hand of God, or the right of God, which is where Jesus sits or stands. So how many seats are there on the right hand of God? And what does this right hand mean? So they say, appoint a wicked man against me. So David here is sort of complaining about all these people who are against him. Let an accuser stand on his right. So in the New Revised Version, which I'm reading from here, it doesn't use the word Satan here, but in the Hebrew Bible, in any Hebrew Bible, it will say, let a Satan stand on his right. Yeah, it doesn't say ha Satan, because it's not saying the Satan. It's let an accuser stand on his right hand. So just emphasizing that Satan is some kind of title. And then we go to Zechariah, which is towards the end of the Tanakh, and this is the last mention of Satan in the Old Testament. So it's Zechariah 3:1. And then he showed me the high priest Joshua standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, O Satan. Okay, so we've got Joshua here, and this is Joshua the high priest, who was appointed by God after the Babylonian captivity. So the Babylonian captivity, yeah, we're talking about those hundreds of years BC, and just prior to the building of the temple. And Joshua obviously is appointed by God to build the temple. Now, Joshua was dressed in filthy clothes as he stood before the angel. So we're in the heavenly court. Yeah, we're in the heavenly court here. The angel who stood before him take off his filthy clothes. So we'll see later these filthy clothes are a metaphor for something. And to him he said, see, I have taken away your guilt. So the filthy clothes were a metaphor for guilt, because Satan has accused Joshua. And therefore he's got guilt, but it's taken away from him. And I will clothe you in festival apparel. And they give him a clean turban as well. And that's it. That is Satan in the Old Testament. And as I said, I'm not going to be dealing with Isaiah, where Satan isn't mentioned, or Ezekiel 28, or the serpent in the Garden of Eden. There's no inverted pentagrams. There's no depiction of horns and breathing fire and animal heads. Yeah. So we do come to that later on. So we move into the New Testament now, and the most famous entry about Satan is in Matthew 4 in the Gospels. And let me read. It says, Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And we know that in ancient Egypt, God is the Set is the god of the wilderness. And what's interesting throughout this passage is you see the word Satan used, you see the word devil used, you see the word tempter used. And if you look into the Greek, you'll see Satan and the devil being used, diabolos, meaning the deceiver. So it's quite accurate in its translation if you look at it. Into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, at which time he was famished. I'm not surprised. The tempter came to him and said, came to Jesus, that is, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. But he answered, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from God. I assume that means that's the Logos. The devil took him to the holy city and placed him on a pinnacle of the temple. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. Jesus said, do not put the Lord to your test. Now, the most important for me here is the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world. All this I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Now, Jesus rejects this. But what's interesting here is that he's looking at all the kingdoms of the world. So it must have been David's kingdom, at least at the center of that. If you look at the research material of Ahmad Osman, he believes that David is based upon Tutmosis III, the Pharaoh of ancient Egypt, whose kingdom was identical or very similar to David's kingdom. And it's a very materialistic one. And obviously it's the same kingdom that God had promised the descendants of Abraham, going from the Nile all the way to the Euphrates. And Jesus rejects this materialistic kingdom in favor of an immaterial spiritual kingdom, and obviously not wanting to kneel down and worship Satan. And Jesus said, away with you, Satan. It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And so obviously we get other mentions, get behind me, Satan, in the Gospels and what have you, and beyond that. But it's not really until Revelation 12 we get another really good mention of Satan. And this is the first place we'll see that he gets characterized. So Revelation 12, right? A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the moon and under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and crying out in birth pains in the agony of giving birth. So a portent is like a prophecy, a message for the future, from what I can see when I looked up in the dictionary. Yeah, and the birth pangs, there's another going to be a reference towards of Eve, in the curse of Eve in the Garden of Eden. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great dragon, with seven heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems or diadems on his head. A diadem, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, is like a crown studded with jewels. So it's like a reference to royalty. And his tail swept a third of the stars of heaven and threw them down to the earth. In ancient Egypt, like very important souls are connected with stars. Wandering, the souls are seen as these wandering stars. I mean, I'm not saying anything, but that's what came to my mind when I read that. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, so that he may devour the child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a male son who is to rule all the nations. With an iron rod, the woman fled to the wilderness, a place prepared by God. and a war. Then it leads into the war. This is relevant now because we're going to hear that this great dragon is Satan. This is the war that broke out in heaven. This famous mythological war. A war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. That great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the world. So from this chapter here, which is the last book, we get the first depiction of Satan being a great red dragon, having these heads and these diadems and horns and what have you. Yeah, who's called Satan, the deceiver of the world. And then he pursues the woman who was giving, but the woman was given 2 wings of the eagle, and flies away. But the dragon then wages war with her children, her children who kept the commandments. Now, in ancient mythology, you've got the eagle commanding the air, and then you've got the serpent that commands the earth and the sea, rather like Enlil and Anki. So I don't know whether that's a reference to that. It sounds very much like it is. Then we're moving into the end of the chapter. Then the dragon took his stand on the sea. This is important. Then the dragon took his stand on the seashore, right? And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. So what we've got here is a distinction between the beast rising out of the sea in Revelation 13 and the great dragon. But then if we look on and read on, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns are 10 diadems, and on his head the blasphemous names. So the beast rising out of the sea, there's a distinction between it and Satan, the great dragon, but he's depicted in the same way. He's got the same image. And the same happens for the beast of the earth. And then we're into Revelation 13 here, which is the famous chapter and verse where you'll get the 666. And funnily enough, it is Revelation 13. And the verse where we see 666 is verse 18. And 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. That it could be a coincidence. I don't know. Knowing the Bible, I doubt it whether it is a coincidence. And then 1 plus 8 is 9, and 9 is the number of the world. So I'll just read that, the verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is a number of a person. Its number is 666. So it's written there. It's not actually given in digits, if you like. And then we move to Revelation 20, which is a similar sort of mythological story. Then I saw an angel coming down, holding in his hand the key, coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. He seized, here we go again, he seized the great dragon. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years so he could deceive the nations no more. Okay, so Satan is seen as the deceiver of the nations, the Goyim. And then Revelation 20 then leads into Gog and Magog, the great battle, Gog and Magog. And that's it. I mean, that is really it for Satan in the Bible. I know, as I'm saying before, he first appears in Chronicles, the name, and he's not introduced and he's not depicted. And he's not depicted until Revelation 12, just prior towards to the 13, where we get the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the earth. And so that concludes my little video cast, and thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you in the next video.